You are listening to the Screen to Screen Selling Talk Show hosted by Doug DeVitri, your source to increasing sales, productivity, and the customer experience. In each show, we will sit down with world-class thought leaders to discuss latest trends, innovative concepts, and ideas to keep you ahead of the curve using the latest technology. Welcome back, everybody. Today we have one of the most exciting guests when it comes to delivering presentations online. Author of the Virtual Presenters Playbook. It's not even available yet, but will be available soon. My good buddy, Roger Courville. Welcome to the show today.
Thanks, Doug. Pleasure to be here. Easy for me to say, right?
Yeah. You know, it's interesting going back, gosh, more than a decade now, looking at delivering presentations online. You were doing it before people even knew what it even meant to deliver a message, kind of like we're doing right now. What was that like when you're trying to convince people that, hey, here's another way of being able to communicate? Gosh, and tell me how far that goes back, because I know it's more than a decade.
Yeah, 1999. So coming up on 16 years for me. IBM was our biggest client. Nobody knew what a webinar, webcast, e-seminar, iSeminar. I've heard them and seen them in every category. IBM was our biggest client, and they'd do it. They'd invite, they'd get 400 people to show up to go, what's this? And then our phone would ring, which was actually kind of a cool time in history. But at that time, we were glad if people even had 56K modems. There was no video, slides were static. It feels pretty primitive compared to what we got today.
Yeah, and how it's evolved, not just with the technology, but the skill sets. One of the things that I want to get in with you today is not so much of the delivery of what we do, because, we can get a lot of that in your book, but from the learner's perspective, especially when we're trying to influence decisions or be able to sell what we're doing in a remote environment.
Yeah, would love to. I think that one of the things that is both the problem and the opportunity, two sides of the same coin with regard to the proliferation of technology in the selling process, has been both downside, overwhelm, and feeling of discomfort, because when we're selling, none of us want to feel uncomfortable in front of a prospect. But the flip side is, where and how do each of these things uniquely fit into our bag of tricks? Because when you've got one that fits just the right spot, as to kind of badly paraphrase Mark Twain, the difference between the right word and almost the right word is the difference between the fire and the firefly. And there's a time and a place when web and video conferencing, like what we're doing right now, is the best thing to do.
Yeah, and I would imagine that, customers that aren't comfortable with the technology, like, how would you even convince them that, what we're doing is going to be actually in your best interests?
You know what, rather ironically, oftentimes I've worked with sales teams, and they come, I'll hear occasionally from someone who says it's the client who ends up driving the salesperson, right? Salesperson still wants to get on the airplane, and the client's going, no, wait a minute, we just need to, figure out the next thing in the contract. Why do you need to get on an airplane? So, and the flip side, if you're inside sales, there's a time when just the telephone is fine. There's a time when just email is fine. But there is a time when it is irreplaceably powerful to have a face-to-face dialogue, but I don't actually have to shake your hand being in there in person.
Yeah, and some of the best lessons can be learned in making some of the mistakes, with communicating with some of this latest technology. What do you see some of the mistakes that, let's say, a salesperson can make when trying to, let's say, pull from the bag of tricks and the customer doesn't actually want that trick?
Well, it's entirely fair. I think one of the common challenges, easy to overcome, but one of the common challenges is just because I can throw up some PowerPoint doesn't mean I should throw up with PowerPoint. And, this meeting, for instance, you and I are just using video conferencing right now, right? If we wanted to, we could pull up something on our desktop or the contract or a PowerPoint chart that shows how the project will unfold, so I could better set expectations for what's going to happen after somebody signs the deal. But I think one of the big challenges is using something when it doesn't need to be used.
Yeah. And with all of these different options, because we can do participant chat, we can actually pull up the whiteboard, we can present slides. Is there one way that's more effective than another, in your opinion?
Well, a phrase that I'm fond of saying, probably ad nauseum, is talk with people, not at them. And that would even be true when we're thinking about the word presentation, which can sometimes mean our actual PowerPoint deck. It can sometimes mean the act of communicating. And I think it's real easy when we go online to do too much of the talking.
Yeah, and part of that conversation, even maybe you've heard before, use your ears and your mouth in equal proportions, right?
All right.
What do you find that same environment where, let's say we're having a conversation, as a salesperson, just kind of ask questions, sit back and just listen and let the customer do the talking? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, or think about how much it's okay for you. Let's say you are making a presentation, right? Early sales stage, or you've done some needs gathering, and now you want to present the solution or the proposal. I think if you start in with an in-person assumption of going, okay, how much talking would I do before I really want to shut my trap and listen or ask a question? And now when we move online, I'd suggest take whatever that interval is and shorten it up a little bit. Because it's, email's a click away. It's too easy to sit here and pretend I'm looking at you while I'm checking something.
Yeah.
And so I don't know that there's a perfect answer, right? I mean, the selling process doesn't necessarily need to use all of the chat and polling functions and those kinds of things, though I think salespeople can and should do their own mini webinars, probably a whole separate discussion on our part. I think that's a totally missed opportunity for most sales teams. But I think bearing in mind that the very first thing that is the most powerful thing we can do is actually dialogue, which, to your point, involves listening, hopefully more than we talk.
And so looking at different tools and different options of tools, I know you kind of have your favorite. I kind of have my favorite. How would you suggest a salesperson or maybe a sales manager that's looking to adopt maybe a system for their internal operations? How would you go about assessing to figure out which of these tools would be right for them?
Well, let's speak to the sales manager who wants to drive productivity within their team. I think there are two really critical things that tend to get overlooked at the organizational level. Since the background of web conferencing comes out of teleconferencing, it's still most frequently purchased for an organization through the IT department. And the most frequent use of audio, telephone, and then web and video conferencing tends to be meetings, and they tend to buy tools from a teleconferencing provider or in that frame of reference, meaning two things tend to be left behind, as in, are there any specific tools that your sales team needs, particular to your sales process, right? Do you need all the webinar tools? No. Is there something in particular that would be really useful? For instance, your web conferencing solution's ability to pass a document back and forth, so you can actually hand somebody the PDF or the Word document. The other is that administrative and reporting. Right? I mean, depending on the nature of your sales organization, you may have a certain set of KPIs, and hey, I want my inside reps to be on the phone, have log 4 hours of talk time a day, or whatever that KPI is. Well, you've got those same kind of reporting mechanisms in the back end. So being part of the RFI or RFP inside of your organization, and not just letting IT buy the cheapest thing, but actually making sure that your needs are represented, would be, I think, one of the more powerful things you could do. Example of one of the most overlooked features in the world of web conferencing, web and video conferencing, that I think sales managers should just beat the crap out of their sales teams with. It's the instant meeting. The ability for somebody to take an incoming phone call and say, well, instead of scheduling that meeting in the future here, let me send you a link and let's hop into a video conference and do it right now. Meaning, instead of the meeting possibly happening next Tuesday at 2, let's get it done right now.
Yeah.
That's one of the most powerful features a salesperson can use.
Yeah, very interesting, because we're talking about several different teams inside of the company, IT, sales, but then also marketing, right? Because if marketing's producing great brochures and great literature, or have these websites.
That's the problem. They produce great brochures.
and the salesperson takes this material, right, and takes to the customer, but it's not the marketing materials or slides or aids, whatever it might be, aren't designed for this sales type of environment. then they're completely missed the boat. And then go back to what? Demoing features and benefits and all the gizmos in between.
Yeah. Well, I mean, think about, we were talking a little earlier about the right time and right place for different types of technology. The power of real time is being real time. And I think and this sounds like a no-brainer when we're having a conversation, and if we imagine, sitting in a room with 20 sales managers, it's a no-brainer that the most powerful thing that I can do when I'm actually on the horn with the client isn't going through all 40 slides in the corporate deck that I got from the marketing team. It's picking out those things that are interesting and useful and most relevant to the conversation that I'm having right now. And so how do I navigate and do that in real time? As one of many examples of is the power of real time, as opposed to all of the other things that are asynchronous, right? Those things that end up in your blog or you send through email or other ways of communicating with the prospect.
Yeah, Roger. Well, you are the real deal. You are the author of the Virtual Presenter's Handbook. Go out and get it. It's not available yet, but when it does, I don't see how. There it is right there.
That's the first copy ever. It's not even on the market yet, but it'll be soon.
We can all improve our tools. We can all improve our skills. Roger, you're always a go-to person on that, and I really appreciate you being a part of this today.
Always a pleasure, Doug.
You are listening to the Screen to Screen Selling Talk Show, hosted by Doug DeVitri, your source to increasing sales, productivity, and the customer experience. In each show, we will sit down with world-class thought leaders to discuss latest trends, innovative concepts, and ideas to keep you ahead of the curve using the latest technology.
Another person to join early. Well,
if you're familiar with Google Plus, how to do a Hangout, or even like Join.me and some of the other screen sharing things I've seen.
Oh, congratulations!